Welcome. I'm Enrico Guarini, faculty member at the University of Milano Bicocca, and today I'm here in Milan for the RAI Train, the EU-funded research infrastructure training program, to get some insight about financial management of research infrastructure. To better understand these topics, we are here with Mr. Markus Pasterk, Administrative Director of BBM MRI ERIC. Markus, first of all, thank you to be here to share your knowledge about this subject. To get some context to our conversation, can you briefly take me through your career and what your current position is?
Well, thank you first of all for inviting me. My name is Markus Pasterk. I'm the Administrative Director of BBMRI ERIC, and I'm in this position since now 3 years. I'm a trained molecular biologist, but very early in my career decided to change to research management, and I was lucky enough to get an offer in the Ministry of Science and Research at that time in the Austrian government. And so I changed from the university to the ministry and becoming a scientific officer there first. And through the career, I went even up to Director General for International Research and all research funding in Austria. Now, at that time, there was a decision to take if I will stay forever in research administration or research management, or if I shall go back closer to research. And I was again lucky that the World Health Organization offered me a job, namely at the International Agency for Research on Cancer, to become its first scientific coordinator. And I went to Lyon. And I was there for the next 3 years. After that time, I helped and was owner of a private research company providing research consultancy, again in France. And from there, I moved back to Austria to become the first administrative director of BBMRI ERIC, where I am right now.
Can you give us some details about your organization, BBMRI ERIC?
BBMRI ERIC is the biobanking and biomolecular resources research infrastructure. And our institution was set up to facilitate and help researchers to access biological material and biological resources. Now, a lot of medical research, drug development, validation of biomarkers, is based on biological material. And to facilitate, to improve the access to that material, the European Commission and the member states have agreed to set up this new research infrastructure.
Good, very interesting. Moving inside the topic of our conversations, let's talk about the general framework of research infrastructure and how this impacts their financial management. So the question is, are there any differences in the financial management of research infrastructures?
Yes, indeed. First of all, because research infrastructures are using very different legal instruments. And depending on that legal instrument, you have different financial rules and regulations. There are the older European research infrastructures like CERN, ESO, EMBL. They were set up with an international treaty. So part of this treaty, they also introduced specific financial rules for this research infrastructure. Some research infrastructures are using private law legal instruments like limited company or association. And again, depending where they are established, the financial rules and regulations of that country and that type of legal structure will impose the rules for the internal market. Now, ERICS and BBMRI is one of those, is a relatively new European legal instrument. Again, has a different set of rules because according to the ERIC regulation, which regulates the setting up of an ERIC, implies that certain rules are according to the statutory seat of the organization. Like in BBMRI ERIC, it's seated in Graz in Austria. So Austrian law, for example, for social labor law is implicated and therefore has its implication on financial management. development. But it also can be, it also has some additional benefits because ERICs are VAT exempted in all the European Union. So again, it has some implications on how you are setting up a financial management for a research infrastructure.
Well, so BBMRI ERIC is a distributed research infrastructure. What does it mean to be a distributed research infrastructure, and what's about the funding model of BBMRI ERIC?
There are in principle two modes for research infrastructures. Those which have a central building and all the research services are done in this single site, and mostly the physics research infrastructures are very good examples. These are synchrotron radiation facilities, this can be light facilities, and then the research is done on those facilities. Now, in life sciences, in contrast, and very often also in environmental sciences and also in humanities and social sciences, research infrastructures are not located on a single place. It's not one big building with all the different institutions and people working in one place, but it makes use of existing institutions, universities, research organizations in different countries, in different places. And of course, this distribution of personnel, of equipment, of staff has implication in the funding models. Now, if you take for a second the ERIC as a model, the basic funding for such a research infrastructure comes from mandatory contribution of its members. Important to understand here is that it's not people nor institutions who are members, but it's countries. So it's actually the government of Italy, the government of Austria, the government of whichever country is joining, is signing up formally to contribute to the development of such a research infrastructure. So it's kind of a membership system. The difference between distributed research infrastructures and single-site research infrastructures is how you're using the expenses, what labor law, what social security law you have to apply for your staffing, but also where and how you provide services. So there are actually really some big differences.
So what are the main financial challenges of distributed research infrastructure?
The main challenges indeed are the different labor law and social security systems in those countries. We have to apply different regulations to our employees, and you need to be aware of those differences. Secondly, a distributed research infrastructure, because of its situation in different countries, has to apply and has to follow different rules. And very often the national or local research infrastructures are funded by local or national sources, and they have different rules, they have different reporting periods. And to bring those national rules together with the coordinating application, this is one of the biggest challenges.
So can we say that there are any peculiarities of distributed research infrastructure in different countries that affect financial management?
Yes, they indeed exist. Different countries have different taxation rules, and who is paying the tax, who is paying the wage tax, who has to be registered, is it the institution or the people? For social security and pension funds, you have differences in the different countries, and you need to be aware, and you need that kind of knowledge to have a long planning for research infrastructures when they are distributed.
So when setting up a new research infrastructure, what is needed to improve the financial management of a new organization?
The most important part is to understand the legal system in which the research infrastructure was set up. And this legal system will then apply to a certain extent what financial rules you have to apply. Is it private law or public law? Is it an international legal instrument or is it a national one? And then when you understand these systems, you need to consult with the tax authorities, with the finance ministries in the involved countries, because ERICs, for example, are VAT exempted, but it is only the coordinating unit which has this power to be VAT exempted, and it cannot so easily be transferred to the national hubs. And again, some countries accept these procedures and others not. The next step in developing your financial system according to the legal system you are working in is to set up the reporting and auditing rules you would want to apply for your budgets. And then once this is done, you will identify the necessary responsibilities, signature powers, and people involved in then operating, setting up the accounting systems, the cost centers, and so on.
And once the research infrastructure is already working, what kind of financial rules or resources are needed or are available in your context?
I think once a research infrastructure is operating, the most important item is flexibility. And flexibility means you need to adjust to changing legal systems. Social security systems are changing, accounting systems are changing, taxation is changing. You might get new member countries in, you might lose some others. So you need to be flexible to adjust to this situation, adjust your systems, your reportings, and your internal procedures.
These issues remind me the problem, the importance of financial sustainability, which of course, you know, it's an issue for every public-private organization. What does it mean, financial sustainability, for a research infrastructure?
Financial sustainability indeed is an important issue for research infrastructures. Most of the research infrastructures were set up by the governments or research funding institutions, which means they depend on the funding of those institutions. Now, different countries are applying different rules, and you need to bring those together. Secondly, you need to provide financial support also through research funding means. You need to understand the landscape of funding for your research infrastructure. You need to acquire funds from national, local, regional levels to be more flexible in the operations of your institution. The third item here is to develop a fee structure for your services. And last but not least, also potentially develop some commercial activities which can sustain certain expenses of your research infrastructure.
So, can we identify the key seeds for assuring long-term financial sustainability of research infrastructures?
I think in terms of key seeds, the most important part is to have a long-lasting commitment from your member states participating in your research infrastructure. Even if your budgets are annually or biannually, you need this commitment on a longer term run, if it is 5 years or 10 years whatsoever. Secondly, you need a system which allows you to acquire other income streams. That could be research or infrastructure programs, either from the European Commission or from some national funding. So you need to be aware of those activities so that you can apply for such funding. Thirdly, the services we are providing and research infrastructures are primarily there, and they exist to provide research services to the scientific community, is to also understand the expenses of such services and develop, where necessary, a fee structure for such services. And of course, as I said before, also to a certain level, some commercial activities can help you in getting a more sustainable infrastructure running.
Well, Markus, we always finish our webinar with the take-home messages for our conversation. So, especially according to your scientific background, I would ask you to identify the must-have competencies in financial management for science professionals holding managerial position, and also from people coming from other sectors, maybe the business sector, and entering the complex world of research infrastructures.
I think my take-home message would be to understand that any management decision has financial implications. And to understand this implication, need to understand some systems. You need to understand basics of financial systems of accounting. You need to be able to understand and read a balance sheet. You need to know whom to ask for advice, and you need to be trained. And the Executive Master Program we are developing here might be one of the best tools to get this knowledge into the existing scientific personnel who want to become or are currently trained on management positions in research infrastructures.
Good. So, Markus, again, thank you for coming here and to share your knowledge about this topic with us. Thank you again.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me as well.